The 90s may be seen by a lot of people as the last great decade for country music, but it wasn't a great sound of music that came to Nashville overnight. Many years artists paid their dues in the decades before the 90s, and the artists from the past decade would lay the groundwork for the sound to come. With country music losing its edge in the early 80s, many felt that pop country was the future of the country sound. As we look at each year from the 80s to the end of the 1990s, we find that pop country was a dividing influence on the sound of the 90s, as well as the raw country sounds of the past. The artists that grew up in the pop country era would take sounds, mixing it with old style country for a new neo-pop country that was true to its roots and made a lasting impression for years to come.
Here's a song that was just recently, about 2 months ago, my first #1 record, and I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for helping to make that happen. It's a song that was laid around Nashville for about 3 years, and nobody recorded it, and I finally stumbled up on it. I guess I was doing a lot of stumbling back in those days, but my co-producer, Garth Fundus, found this song for me, and when I heard it, I knew it was a hit song, but I didn't really expect it to be as big a hit song as it was, and we're real proud of this one. It's the title song of our brand new album. It's called Don't Close Your Eyes.
Keith Whitley has seemed like he's been playing music since the day he was born. He was born in Ashland, Kentucky, and fell in love with country music very early on. But that wouldn't be the only love he would find early in life. In high school, he and his friends would find time racing their cars down the mountain roads of Kentucky and spending the rest of the time drinking up bootleg bourbon. One night, Keith found himself in a car with one of his close friends as they took a 120-mile-an-hour turn around a curve. The wreck would break Keith Whitley's neck, and his friend would lose his life. That didn't slow down the wild side of Keith Whitley. Just a short time later, he would drive his car off a cliff into a river and escape with a broken collarbone. It was clear Keith Whitley loved living on the edge, and he was heading down a road of a short life, unless he could change things. By 1969, Keith was 16 years old and tried to get his life on a much better path as he started to focus on his music. With his brother Dwight, he would perform at a small contest where he would meet Ricky Skaggs. The two would bond over their love for bluegrass and country music. The two would play together wherever they could, and when bluegrass legend Ralph Stanley was late to a show due to a flat tire, the two friends took the stage to keep the crowd from leaving. When Ralph showed up, he was blown away by what he had heard on stage, saying it sounded like him in the early days. This led Ricky and Keith joining Stanley's band, and in 1974, Keith would be the lead singer. Around this time, he would also join up with bluegrass brand J.D. Crowe in the New South.
Well, you love me then as now. Well, you miss me when I'm gone.
He was really making a name for himself in the world of bluegrass music. Keith finally decided to head to Nashville to get country music a shot, as there was no real money at the time for bluegrass artists. In 1983, he arrived in Nashville and quickly signed a deal with RCA Records. This led to his first EP, A Hard Act to Follow, in 1984. The album failed to do anything, and its 2 singles failed to even make the top 50 country charts. However, RCA Records still believed in Keith, and by 1985 would release his full album, LA to Miami. This would give Keith his first top 20 hit, with Miami, Miami hitting number 15.
Calling me from Miami. What took you so long? I thought you'd never call.
3 more singles would follow, with them all doing well in the charts, but none of them would be a smash hit. During the promotion for the album, Keith would meet Lori Morgan, the daughter of country star George Morgan. The two would hit it off and quickly fall in love and get married in November of 1986, and would have a son the following year. In 1987, Keith was hard at work on his follow-up album, but he wasn't happy with how it was going. He asked RCA to shelf the 15 songs they had picked out for the album. He just felt they were not up to his standards, and he wanted more control over the production and songs. The album would be called Don't Close Your Eyes, and would hit stores in 1988. This follow-up album would be a huge success. The first 3 singles would all hit #1. 1988 was coming to a close for Keith, and he found himself on top of the world. A happy marriage, a new son. He adopted Lori Morgan's daughter from a previous marriage. His new album was sitting on the top of country charts, and the singles were all going to #1. And he was already starting work on his next album. It seemed nothing could stop the success of Keith Whitley. nothing but Keith himself.
Got a brand new single coming out in about a week and a brand new album coming out about 4 weeks after that called Don't Close Your Eyes. That's the title of both the single and the album, and I'm real excited about this. This is the first time I've got the chance to produce myself. I co-produced this along with Garth Fundus, and all the feedback we've had on it so far, I think it's the best stuff that we've ever done.
Keith has seemed to put the wild side behind him in the last couple of years, but those close to the singer knew he still had a major struggle with drugs and alcohol. May night started like any other day for Keith. He was home alone. His wife was heading to Alaska for a show. Keith made plans with his brother-in-law to play golf. Before being picked up for that, Keith planned to write some songs for him and Lori to sing together. When his brother-in-law arrived at Keith's home to pick him up for golf, no one came to the door. Worried, he entered the home and found Keith unresponsive on his bed. He was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and there was pronounced dead at the age of 34 due to alcohol poisoning.
We've had a special relationship for about 3 years now. Man, I hate to lose him. He's a real good guy. I know all of his friends and songwriters are going to miss him. I worked with him a couple of weeks ago, and we were making plans to do his Memorial Day show in his hometown. I tell you, I'm so sorry.
The death of Keith Whitley would shock his family, his friends, and his fans, and leave a dark cloud over the country music scene for most of 1989. In August of that year, Keith's follow-up album, I Wonder Do You Think of Me, would be released, and with it would come 2 #1 singles, the title track and It Ain't Nothing. The other singles from the album would all make the top 5. Keith Whitley was gone way too soon, but his impact in country music would still be felt today, as fans who were not even alive in 1989 would discover and fall in love with Keith Whitley.
When you love me tonight, don't close your eyes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Country music had to go on, and it did. In 1986, almost overnight, the face of country music changed with new artists like Randy Travis, Dwight Yoakam, and Steve Earle. 1989 would bring even more new faces to country music. One of the new faces really to break out would be Texas singer Clint Black, who was born near Red Bank, New Jersey, but his family would move to Texas before he was even 1.
What do you say when it's over? Don't know if I should say anything at all.
By the age of 13, Clint had taught himself to play harmonica. At 14, he was writing his own songs, and by 15, he had learned to play the guitar. On the weekend, him and his family would host a backyard barbecue, and the neighbors would come over for some good food and listen to Clint and his brother sing. Clint would take up playing local places as he got older and then expand across Texas. For 6 years, he would do music as a side job while working construction, then bait cutting, and then he was a fisher guide. By 1987, he found himself in Nashville and a meeting with ZZ Top's producer, Bill Ham. This led to a RCA record deal in October of 1987. They released his first album, Killin' Time, in 1989. The first single, Better Man, hit #1. This would be the first time in 14 years that a country artist's first single would hit #1. 5 singles would be released from the album, and 4 of those 5 singles would hit #1. Keith Whitley's wife, Lori Morgan, had been trying to have a successful country career for years. Her first single would be released in 1979 and it hit number 75. Year after year, Lori kept trying with very little success. But as she was dealing with the loss of her husband, her music career was finally taking off. In 1989, she would get her first #1 with 5 Minutes, and her other 2 singles of the year would hit the top 10.
You've got 5 minutes to tell me what I needed to hear. You've got 5 minutes to show me that you're really sincere. That's not much time to change my mind. It'll take a miracle, no doubt.
One of the biggest bands to really make an impact in 1989 was Shenandoah. Their first album in 1987 failed to even make the top 100 charts, but their second album would be released in 1989 and would put the group on the top of the charts. The Road Not Taken would release 3 singles in 1989 and all hit #1. Church on Cumberland Road, 2 Dozen Roses, and Sunday in the South.
We've been rocking all night, don't you know? You got to get me to the church on the Cumberland Road. Jimmy's passed out in a band, but we know he's alive. You know, Ralph still got his head hanging over the side. Here I'm doing only 95. What's the matter with you, man? I thought you said you could drive. Oh, you ran and cried to the bedroom and on through the fire. Now the birds of heaven gone ahead.
But the year wasn't all about newcomers, as one of the most iconic voices in country music from the 70s was still hitting the top of the charts. Vern Gosdin had hits up and down in the charts from the 70s and into the 80s, and in 1989 he would have some of his biggest hits. Who You Gonna Blame It On This Time, I'm Still Crazy, and That Just About Does It all hit the top 10, and his 1988 single Chiseled in Stone would win him the CMA Song of the Year in 1989.
He said, son, I know what you're going through.
Another country singer from years ago was having a major hit, one that had passed away over 35 years before 1989. Hank Williams would team up with his son for an instant classic called Tear in My Beer. The song was written in the early 1950s by Hank Sr., but never released, but Hank had given his demo tape to Big Bill Lister to record. The song went almost unheard until Lister found the demo record in his attic and got in contact with Hank Williams Jr. Hank Jr. would merge the vocal of his father and him together for a powerful duet, and the single would be released in January of 1989. Along with it would be a groundbreaking video that would show Hank Jr. and Hank Sr. singing together, with even Hank Sr. singing a song that he never did perform live.
All these blues that I found have really got me down. You are on my lonely mind.
That music video would win the CMA Music Video of the Year, and the two singers would take home Vocal Event of the Year.
And the winner is George Strait.
In 1989, George Strait would finally take home the top prize at the CMA by winning Entertainer of the Year. George would have his 11th number one in a row in 1989 with Ace in the Hole. Although his daughter was tragically killed a few years before, George did take a small break from touring, but kept focused on his music.
Let me read that again just to make sure. That's right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the CMA members for voting for me tonight, and I'm so excited. I've wanted this for so long. We've got so many people to thank. Thank you. Whew. I've got a great band. I've been accused of not talking a lot and telling a lot of jokes, and maybe that's true, but I've got a great band, and we go out there and we try to do the best that we can when we're on the stage, and I truly believe that the audiences go away entertained, and I hope they do anyway. I want to thank MCA Records for signing me back a long time ago when they had a lot of big X on their roster at the time, and instead of sliding me under the stack, they stuck me right on top with the rest of them. I want to thank Herb Woolsey, my manager. There's so many people. My band, Tom Foote, and my wife, Norma. I want to say hi to Bubba at home, George Jr. as he likes to be called now. Thank you all very much.
Baby's been coming home wearing a smile.
Paul Ostrey had made a name for himself in country music as one of the to-go songwriters, thanks to huge hits like Forever and Ever Amen, When You Say Nothing at All, Digging Up Bones, and more. Paul had always looked to make his own career in country music as more than a writer but also as a singer. He would first team up with two other songwriters for the trio SKO. They would release their album in 1987, and its single, Baby's Got a New Baby, would hit number one.
Baby's acting strange lately. I think baby's got a new baby. I see through her disguise, something in her eyes that she's afraid to tell me, 'cause baby's coming home later.
However, Paul would leave the group shortly after the success to make his own music. In 1988, he would sign a deal with RCA Records and release his second solo album, Sowing Love, in 1989. The album would release 5 singles, and all of them would hit the top 10, such as Love Helps Those, Seeing My Father and Me, and All the Fun.
I talk the way he talks, starting to see my father in me. And I'm happy to see my father in me.
Artist of the Decade is a rare honor. In the 60s, the Academy Board of Directors honored Marty Robbins, and in the 70s, it was Loretta Lynn.
As the 80s came to a close, the ACM would award its Artist of the Decade, an award given out at the end of the decade to the artists who had the most impact of that decade. The ACM would give that award to the group Alabama, who was by far the most successful band of the 80s.
The Artist of the Decade, Alabama! This is our first standing ovation.
I think whether it's a ball team or a band, I think that the most important thing is the coaching, Mr. Dale Morris and Joe Galani, Harold Shedd.
A lot of the new artists that would become known as the sound of the 80s got their start in the closing months of 1989. Alan Jackson, Travis Tritt, Mary Chapin Carpenter, and a young man from Tulsa, Oklahoma that would explode onto the country music scene, unlike anything country music has seen before, helping country music in the 90s go mainstream, as he would bring over fans who swore they would never listen to country music. He would also change the landscape of country music and shape the sound of the 90s for the good and the bad.